The last time I saw my closest friend, we were standing at the edge of her family's property in the early evening, the light coming through the trees in long, pale strips across the grass, and she was telling me about her new baby, and I was nodding and smiling, and the whole time I was thinking about the conversation I'd had with my husband 3 weeks before. The one where he had told me, quietly, without raising his voice, without any particular anger, that he thought it would be better if I spent less time at her house. He did not say I was forbidden. He did not use that word. He said he thought it would be better. And I stood at the edge of her property in that pale evening light, and I smiled at her new baby, and I already knew that I was saying goodbye to her, even though neither of us said that word either. My name is Miriam, and this is Miriam the Amish, the channel where I finally say the things my community would never allow me to say out loud. I grew up Old Order Amish in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I left a few years ago. If you want to hear the truth about Amish life from someone who actually lived it, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. There is still so much I have not told you. Now let me explain something that most people outside my community would find difficult to believe, because it is one of those things that sounds extreme when you say it plainly, but which inside the community feels so ordinary that you almost cannot see it at all. In an Old Order Amish household, a wife's friendships are not entirely her own. Not formally. Not with a written rule that anyone would point to. But practically, actually, in the lived reality of a woman's daily life, the friendships she is able to keep, the women she is able to spend time with, the closeness she is permitted to build with anyone outside her immediate family, all of it exists inside a boundary her husband draws, often without either of them fully acknowledging that he is drawing it. Let me explain how this works, because the mechanism is important, and it is not what you might imagine. A husband in my community does not typically tell his wife she cannot see a particular person. That kind of direct prohibition would itself be unusual, too visible, too much like the kind of control that even the community would raise an eyebrow at. What happens instead is quieter and more effective. He expresses a preference. He mentions, in passing, that he finds a certain woman's husband difficult to get along with. He notes that a particular friendship seems to take his wife away from home more than is practical. He suggests, gently, that the time she spends with a friend might be better used elsewhere. He does not forbid. He simply makes his preferences known in a household where his preferences function as something very close to law. And then he waits for his wife to do what she has been trained her entire life to do, which is to arrange her world around what makes him comfortable, and she does. Not because she is weak, not because she does not love her friend, but because she has been taught, since before she had words for it, that a wife's first loyalty is to her household, and her household is her husband, and a friendship that causes friction in her household is therefore a friendship she is failing to manage correctly. The problem is never his preference. The problem is always her attachment. I had known my closest friend since we were 4 years old. We had grown up 3 farms apart. We had learned to quilt side by side. We had sat through the same sermons on the same hard benches for 18 years. When I married, and she married, and we both moved into the rhythms of our own households, the friendship shifted the way all friendships shift when life gets heavy and full, but it did not break. We found our hours at frolics, at church, in the small gaps between the work that never stopped. She was the only person in my life who knew what I was actually thinking, not the managed version, not the careful performance, the actual thing underneath. My husband had never liked her husband. That was the seed of it. The 2 men had a disagreement years before our marriages, something about a property boundary that had been resolved officially but never resolved between them, and that old friction had never fully cooled. My husband never said he was restricting my friendship because of his difficulty with her husband. He said he thought it would be better if I spent less time at her house. Those were two different sentences pointing at the same door, and only one of them was honest. I want to pause here because I think some of you already feel what I am building toward, and I want you to stay with me. Please subscribe to Miriam the Amish, like this video, and turn on the notification bell, because what I realized in the months after that evening at the edge of her property is something I could not have understood while I was still inside that life. And I think it is one of the most important things I have ever said on this channel. I complied. That is the plain truth of it. I complied not because I was told to, but because I had been shaped from childhood to understand that compliance was love, that making my husband comfortable was faithfulness, that a wife who prioritized her own desires over her husband's preferences was practicing a subtle form of pride. I did not see my friend less because he forbade me. I saw her less because I believed on some level in the part of me that had been built by 20 years of Ordnung and sermon and example, that wanting to see her more than he wanted me to was a kind of selfishness I should be ashamed of. We drifted the way women drift when one of them stops showing up. Slowly, with warmth still in it, because neither of us wanted to name what was happening. She asked me twice if everything was all right, and I said yes both times, and the second time she looked at me for a long moment and did not ask again. She knew. Women always know. They simply learn very quickly that asking the question out loud costs more than not asking it. By the end of that year, we were seeing each other only at church and at the occasional large community gathering, surrounded by people, never alone, never in the easy, private way we had been alone together since we were 4 years old. I lost something that year that I do not think I have fully named even now. Not just her company, something harder to describe, the experience of being known by someone who had no stake in managing my behavior, the particular safety of a friendship where nothing was performed. She had been the one person in my world who saw me without the careful arrangement I maintained everywhere else. And when he said he thought it would be better if I spent less time at her house, what he had actually done, without knowing it, was remove the last witness to my own interior life. An older woman in our community, one who had outlived her husband and therefore spoke with the particular freedom that widowhood sometimes granted Amish women, said something to me once that I did not understand until years later. She said, "Pay attention to a man who has opinions about your friendships, not the opinions themselves, the fact that he has them. A man who is secure does not need to manage who his wife loves." I carried that sentence without knowing what to do with it for a long time. Inside my community, it would have been called unsubmissive thinking, the kind of thought a wife was supposed to bring to prayer rather than to a conversation. But I kept it the way I kept the tin of money behind the pantry board, privately, quietly, in a space I did not show anyone. In therapy, after I left, I learned what my therapist called isolation as control. She explained that one of the earliest and most consistent patterns in a controlled relationship is the slow narrowing of a person's outside connections. It rarely announces itself as isolation, she said. It presents as preference, as practicality, as reasonable concern. He does not like her husband. The friendship takes too much time. She seems different after she spends time with that woman. Each reason sounds rational on its own. The pattern they add up to is something else entirely. She told me that the most reliable way to identify this pattern is to ask a simple question. After the friendship was discouraged, did you feel more yourself or less? Did you become more visible inside your own life or less? I knew the answer before she finished the question. When I left, one of the first people I contacted was my friend. I did not know if she would answer. I did not know what years of managed distance had done to something that had once been as natural as breathing. I sent a letter to an address I still had from years before, and I told her I had left, and I told her I was sorry for the years I had been less present than I should have been, and I told her that I had missed her in a way I had not let myself feel while I was still inside that life, because feeling it fully would have made the loss too real to carry. She wrote back within a week. She said she had known something was wrong from the second time I told her everything was fine. She said she had prayed for me every week since. She said she was glad I had left, and that she was thinking about it herself, and that having someone on the other side made the thinking feel more possible. I will not tell you what happened to her after that, because her story is hers to tell. What I will tell you is that her letter was the first thing in a long time that felt like being seen without a filter, and I understood in reading it that the friendship my husband had quietly discouraged had not died. It had only been waiting, the way things wait that are rooted deeply enough to survive a long, cold season without light. If you grew up somewhere that managed who you were allowed to be close to, not through locks, but through preferences expressed by someone whose preferences you had been taught to treat as your own needs, I see you. If you have ever let a friendship go quiet, not because you wanted to, but because wanting it had become complicated in ways you did not have language for, I see you. If you lost someone who knew the real version of you because the life you were living did not have room for a witness, I see you. You were not disloyal to your friend. You were loyal to a system that had convinced you its needs were yours. That is not the same thing, and the difference between those two things is the beginning of understanding what was actually taken from you. If this story reached something in you, please subscribe to Miriam the Amish, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. There is still so much I have not said. Until next time, choose your freedoms wisely. They might just save your life.